Hi guys, and welcome to this video. In this one, we will continue with the web development career path in this Codecademy series. And in this one, we will complete the Iterators course in this JavaScript module. So we are still in the JavaScript module, and we have 4 courses left. And in this one, you will learn how to use iterator methods to simplify the process of looping over arrays. And we have 2 lesson sections, 1 project section and 1 quiz section. And let's start with the first lesson section. Introduction. We are often unaware of the number of assumptions we make when we communicate with other people in our native languages. If we told you to count to 3, we would expect you to say or think the numbers 1, 2, and 3. We assumed you would know to start with 1 and end with the number 3. With programming, we are faced with needing to be more explicit with our directions to the computer. Here is how we might tell the computer to count to 3. Okay, we learned about for loop in the previous course. Okay, we have iterator variable, the condition, and then we iterate the variable I. When we speak to other humans, we share a vocabulary that gives us quick ways to communicate complicated concepts. When we say bake, it calls to mind a familiar subroutine: preheating an oven, putting something into an oven for a set amount of time, and finally removing it. This allows us to abstract away a lot of details and communicate key concepts more concisely. Instead of listing all those details, we can say we baked a cake and still impart all that meaning to you. In programming, we can accomplish abstraction by writing functions. In addition to allowing us to reuse our code over and over again, functions help to make clear, readable programs. If you encountered count to 3 function in a program, you might be able to quickly guess what the function did without having to stop and read the function's body. We are also going to learn about another way to add a level of abstraction to our programming: higher order functions. Higher order functions are functions that accept other functions as arguments and or return functions as output. This enables us to build abstractions on other abstractions. Just like we hosted a birthday party is an abstraction that may build on the abstraction we made a cake. In summary, using more abstraction in our code allows us to write more modular code, which is easier to read and debug. Okay, this was just the introduction lesson. Let's continue to the next one. Functions as data. JavaScript functions behave like any other data type in the language. We can assign functions to variables and we can reassign them to a new variables. Below, we have an annoyingly long function name that hurts the readability of any code in which it is used. Let's pretend this function does important work and needs to be called repeatedly. Okay, and the function is called announce that I'm doing important work. So definitely a long name. What if we wanted to rename this function without sacrificing the source code? We can reassign the function to a variable with a suitably short name. Okay, here is the example. So in this case, you don't use the parentheses here because you are not calling this function. You are just assigning this function to this busy variable. Okay, busy is a variable that holds a reference to our original function. If we could look up the address in memory of busy and the address in memory of announce that I'm doing important work, they would point to the same place in memory. Our new busy function can be invoked with parentheses as if that was the name we originally gave our function. Okay, notice how we announce that I'm doing important work function without parentheses as the value to the busy variable. We want to assign the value of the function itself and not the value it returns when invoked. In JavaScript, functions are first-class objects. This means that, like other objects you have encountered, JavaScript functions can have properties and methods. Since functions are a type of object, they have properties such as length and name, and methods such as toString. You can see more about the methods and properties of functions in the documentation on the MDN page, and I'll leave you the link to this page in the description of this video so you can check it out. Functions are special because we can invoke them, but we can still treat them like any other type of data. Let's get some practice doing that. Okay, let's see the instructions. We have defined a function with a very long name. Check that 2 plus 2 equals 4 a million times. Here is the function name and here is the function. Okay, this function takes a long time to execute. It checks whether 2 plus 2 equals 4, but it does it a million times, just to be really sure. Create a shorter named variable is 2p2. That will be easier to work with, and assign check that 2 plus 2 equals 4 million times function as its value. Okay, so first create a shorter named variable is 2p2, and now let's assign this function to this variable. So do not use the parentheses now. Invoke your newly created function. Okay, save our code. If we forgot the original name of our function, is there a way we could figure it out? Use is2p2 to console log the name property of the function we assigned to is2p. Check out the documentation if you need a hint. Okay, let's go there and let's console.log name of our function, and now let's use .name, run our code, and here is the original name of our function. So check that 2 plus 2 equals 4 a million times. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. Functions as parameters. Since functions can behave like any other type of data in JavaScript, it might not surprise you to learn that we can also pass functions into other functions as parameters. A higher order function is a function that either accepts functions as parameters, returns a function, or both. We call the functions that get passed in as parameters and invoked a callback functions because they get called during the execution of the higher order function. When we pass a function in as an argument to another function, we don't invoke it. Invoking the function would evaluate to the return value of that function call. With callbacks, we pass in the function itself by typing the function name without the parentheses that would evaluate to the result of calling the function. Okay, here we have example. We wrote a higher order function, time func runtime, so right here. It takes in a function as an argument, so here is the function argument, saves a string time, invokes the callback function, records the time after the function was called, and returns the time the function took to run by subtracting the starting time from the ending time. Here is the return statement. This higher order function could be used with any callback function, which makes it a potentially powerful piece of code. We then invoked timeRun function right here, first with the add1to1 function as parameter. Note how we passed in add1to1 and did not invoke it, so without parentheses. In this example, we invoked timeFuncRuntime right here with an anonymous function that counts backwards from 10. Anonymous functions can be arguments too. Let's get some practice using functions and writing higher order functions. Okay, let's go down, save a variable. Let's copy the variable name. So const, and assign as its value the result of invoking the timeFuncRuntime function. Okay, with the function as argument. Okay. Write a higher order function. Check consistent output. This function should have two parameters, a function and a value. It should call the argument function with the value 2 times. If the callback function produces the same result twice, it should return the result of the function call. Otherwise, it should return the string "this function returned inconsistent results." Okay, let's write that function. So check consistent output. Now let's create the function body, and we are passing one function as the first argument, and then we have a value as the second argument or parameter. And now it should call the argument function with the value 2 times. So first call equals, so we are calling the function that we are passing as argument with the value as the second argument. Okay, so we need 2 calls. Second call, and now let's create the if statement. So we are checking if the callback function produces the same result twice. Okay, so if first call equals second call, and if so, we should return the result of the function call. Okay, so return first call. It's the same as the second call anyway. You can use second call. Otherwise, return the string "this function returned inconsistent results." Okay, I think this should be fine. Don't forget the semicolon. Now invoke your check consistent output function with the add2 function we wrote and a number as arguments. So first argument is add2 function. So just passing as argument, not calling it. And then we should use a number. Let's use 11. And now let's run our code. And that should be all for this exercise. Let's proceed to the next one. So like usual, at the end we always have a review exercise. So this is everything. This describes everything we did so far in this section. Great job by thinking about functions as data and learning about higher order functions. You have taken important steps in being able to write clean modular code and take advantage of JavaScript's flexibility. Let's review what we learned in this lesson. So abstraction allows us to write complicated code in a way that is easy to reuse, debug, and understand for human readers. We can work with functions the same way we would any other type of data, including reassigning them to new variables. JavaScript functions are first-class objects, so they have properties and methods like any other object in JavaScript. Functions can be passed into other functions as parameters, which is also called callback functions, and a higher order function is a function that either accepts functions as parameters, returns a function, or both. Okay, let's proceed to the next lesson section. So next section is called Iterators. Introduction to Iterators. Imagine you had a grocery list and you wanted to know what each item on the list was. You would have to scan through each row and check for the item. This common task is similar to what we have to do when we want to iterate over or loop through an array. One tool at our disposal is the for loop. However, we also have access to built-in array methods which make looping easier. The built-in JavaScript array methods that help us iterate are called iteration methods, at times referred to as iterators. Iterators are methods called on arrays to manipulate elements and return values. In this lesson, you will learn the syntax for these methods, their return values, how to use the documentation to understand them, and how to choose the right iterator method for a given task. Okay, inspect the code in main.js file. So right here, notice the different methods being called on the arrays. Okay, so here is one array, and we are calling for each method on this array. So basically we are looping over each array item. And then we have a numbers array, numbers.map, so map method. And then we have things array, and we are using filter method for this one. So forEach, map, and filter methods. Run the code to see the output, and let's see. So in the first one, in this array right here, we are looping every array item, and here we are console logging this sentence including the each item. So first it was Picasso, then Carlo, and then this, and then Utamaro. Then we have a map method right here. So basically we are looping over array items, and we are returning a new array. So square numbers becomes a new array with items from this array, but where each item is multiplied by itself, so number multiplied by number, so 1 multiplied by 1, 2 multiplied by 2, 3 multiplied by 3, 4 by 4, and 5 by 5. And here is the new array. And in the last example, we are calling the filter method. We also have a new array called only numbers, and we are creating a new array where we import only number items from this original array. So here is the conditional. So if thing or array item is a type of number, then import that item to this only numbers array. Then we console log only numbers array, and we have only numbers from this original array. Okay, that should be all for this introduction exercise. Let's proceed to the next one. The forEach method. The first iteration method that we are going to learn is forEach. Aptly named, forEach will execute the same code for each element of an array. Here we have one example with the groceries array. The code above will log a nicely formatted list of the groceries to the console. Let's explore the syntax of invoking forEach method. So groceries.forEach calls the forEach method on the groceries array. That's simple. ForEach takes an argument of callback function. Remember, a callback function is a function passed as an argument into another function. We learned about that in one of the previous exercises. ForEach loops through the array and executes the callback function for each element of that array. During each execution, the current element is passed as an argument to the callback function. The return value for each will always be undefined. Another way to pass a callback for each method is to use arrow function syntax. So one parameter, then arrow function syntax. We can also define a function beforehand to be used as the callback function. So you declare a function, then you pass that function as the argument to the forEach method. The above example uses a function declaration, but you can also use a function expression if you would like, or arrow function as well. All three code snippets do the same thing. In each array iteration method, we can use any of the three examples to supply a callback function as an argument to the iterator. It is good to be aware of the different ways to pass in callback functions as arguments in iterators because developers have different stylistic preferences. Nonetheless, due to the strong adoption of ES6, we will be using arrow function syntax in the later exercises. Okay, so instructions for this exercise are: iterate over the fruits array to log I want to eat a plus the name of each fruit to the console. For example, I want to eat a mango. You may use any form of callback you prefer. Okay, let's call the forEach method on our fruits array. So forEach parentheses, and now let's create our callback function. The parameter for the callback function will be every item in this array. And now let's console log I want to eat a plus the name of each fruit. Okay, I want to eat a. Let's concatenate the item, so each item of that array. That should be fine. Now let's run our code, and here is the result. So I want to eat a mango, papaya, pineapple, and apple. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. The map method. The second iterator we are going to cover is map method. When map is called on an array, it takes an argument of a callback function and returns a new array. Take a look at an example of calling map. We saw that in the previous exercise. Map works in a similar manner to forEach. The major difference is that map returns a completely new array. In the example above, numbers is an array of numbers. Big numbers will store the return value of calling map on numbers array. Numbers.map will iterate through each element in the numbers array and pass the element into the callback function. return number multiplied by 10 is the code we wish to execute upon each element in the numbers array. This will save each value from the numbers array multiplied by 10 to a new array. If we take a look at numbers and big numbers, so the output of this one will be this, and the output of this one will be this array, because we multiplied every number by 10. Notice that the elements in numbers were not altered and big numbers is a new array. So we didn't modify the original array. Okay, add your code under the animals array and before the line console log. So right here, use map to create a new array that contains the first character of each string in the animals array. Save the new array to a const variable named secret message. Okay, let's copy the name for the const variable. Secret message equals animals.map. Okay, so element will be the function's parameter, and then let's use the arrow function syntax, and we should return the first character of each string in the animals array, so of each element of that array. So return element and then do this. This is how we will access the first character in every single string. Okay, this should be fine. Use map to divide all the numbers in big numbers by 100. Save the returned values to a variable declared with const called small numbers. So const small numbers, and we should use the map method on the numbers array. And let's see, divide all the numbers. First let's use element as the parameter name, arrow function. So return divide all the numbers in big numbers by 100. So element divided by 100. Okay, this should be fine. And now let's console.log secret message array, and let's console.log small numbers array, so we can see our new arrays. And here we have numbers from this array divided by 100. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's fine. And in the first one, we have the first character of each item in the animals array. So H, E, L, O, W, O, R, L, and D. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the next exercise. The filter method. Another useful iterator method is called filter method. Like map, filter also returns a completely new array. However, filter returns an array of elements after filtering out certain elements from the original array. The callback function for the filter method should return true or false, depending on the element that is passed to it. The elements that cause the callback function to return true are added to the new array. Take a look at the following example. Okay, let's take a look at the example. words is an array that contains string elements. So right here, const short words declares a new variable that will store the returned array from invoking filter method on this words array. The callback function is an arrow function. Okay, so right here, it has a single parameter, word parameter. Each element in the words array will be passed to this function as an argument. Word.length less than 6 is the condition in the callback function. Any word from this words array that has fewer than 6 characters will be added to the short words array. Let's also check the values of words and short words. So we are checking if words length is less than 6. So we'll have a new array with the chair, music, brick, pen, and door elements. So we don't have a pillow element because it has 6 characters and we are checking for only less than 6. Observe how words was not mutated, changed, and short words is a new array. Okay, call the filter method on random numbers to return values that are less than 250. Save them to a new array called small numbers declared with const keyword. So let's copy this. So const small numbers. We are calling the filter method on the random numbers array. So once again, let's use the arrow function syntax. And so the parameter is the every element in the array. And now let's check if element of this array is less than 250, and if so, return true. Okay, that should be fine. Now let's work with an array of strings. Invoke filter on the favorite words array to return elements that have more than 7 characters. Save the returned array to a const variable named long favorite words. Let's copy this one. So a new array. We are calling the filter on favorite words array. Okay, parameter arrow syntax, and we are checking if element has more than 7 characters. So if element, so dot length, remember this is a property for strings, and we are checking if the strings have more than 7 characters, so greater than 7, and if so, return true. That should be fine, I think. Yep. And now let's console.log our first newly created array and the second one, so we can see the results. Run our code, and I logged the wrong array. In the first array, we have numbers, only numbers that are less than 250. So we don't have this one and this one because they are greater than 250. And in the second array, we are checking for strings that have more than 7 characters. So this one, and this one. So these two strings are not included in the new one because they have less than 7 characters. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the next one. The findIndex method. We sometimes want to find the location of an element in an array. That is where the findIndex method comes in. Calling findIndex on an array will return the index of the first element that evaluates to true in the callback function. Here is an example. So jumbled nums is an array that contains elements that are numbers. Okay, const less than 10 declares a new variable that stores the returned index number from invoking findIndex method. The callback function is an arrow function that has a single parameter, so num parameter. Each element in the jumbled nums array will be passed to this function as an argument, so each item. Num less than 10 is the condition that elements are checked against. FindIndex will return the index of the first element which evaluates to true for that condition. Let's take a look at what less than 10 evaluates to. So console log less than 10, so it evaluates to 3. If we check what element has index of 3, we will get the result 5. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. So index number of 3. Great, the element in index 3 is the number 5. This makes sense since 5 is the first element that is less than 10. If there isn't a single element in the array that satisfies the condition in the callback, then findIndex will return -1. Okay, invoke findIndex on the animals array to find the index of the element that has the value elephant and save the returned value to a const variable named foundAnimal. So const foundAnimal animals array find index. Let's use the arrow function syntax. So element and let's check if the index of the element has the value elephant. Okay, so if element has the value of elephant, save our code. Let's see if we can find the index of the first animal that starts with the letter S. Call findIndex on the animals array, return the index of the first element that starts with S, assign the returned value to a const variable named starts with S. Okay, let's create our variable starts with S equals to, let's use this as the reference. So animals.findIndex element return the index of the first element that starts with S. So if element first character of the element is lowercase s, okay, that should be fine. And now let's console.log our new arrays so we can see the results. Run our code. So first we got 7, so the element with the index number of 7, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and here is the elephant. And now in the second one we got the number 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and the seal string is the first string that has the lower s as the first character. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. The reduce method, another widely used iteration method, is reduce. The reduce method returns a single value after iterating through the elements of an array, thereby reducing that original array. Take a look at the example below. Okay, so we have a numbers array right here, and right here we are calling the reduce method on this numbers array, where we iterate over each element in that array, and then we store the value in this variable right here. And in this example we are iterating over elements and we sum all the items in this array. So 1 plus 2 plus 4 and plus 10, and that is equal to 17. Here are the values of accumulator and current value as we iterate through the numbers array. Okay, iteration, first, second, third iteration. Let's see, accumulator is 1, current value is 2, and return value is 3. So this is accumulator in the first iteration, this is the current value, and the result is 3. Then we have the second iteration. Now the accumulator is 3, which is sum of these two items. Then the current value is 4 and the result is 7. Then we have third iteration where the accumulator is 7 as the result from the previous iteration, and then the current value is 10, which is equal 17. Now let's go over the use of reduce from the example above. Numbers is an array that contains numbers. Summed nums is a variable that stores the returned value of invoking reduce method on numbers array. Numbers.reduce calls the reduce method on the numbers array and takes in a callback function as argument. Okay, here is the function. The callback function has two parameters, accumulator and current value, right here and right here. The value of accumulator starts off as the value of the first element in the array, and the current value starts as the second element. We went through that in this table right here. To see the value of accumulator and current value change, review the chart above, and we did that already. As reduce iterates through the array, the return value of the callback function becomes the accumulator value for the next cycle, for the next iteration. Current value takes on the value of the current element in the looping process. Okay, the reduce method can also take an optional second parameter to set the initial value for the accumulator. Remember the first argument in the callback function. For instance, let's see, and here is the optional parameter, and we are setting the initial value to 100, and here is an updated chart that accounts for the second argument. So first iteration, accumulator is equal 100 because we set that to the initial value. Then the current value is 1, it's right here. Then the return value 101. Then the second iteration goes from 101 plus 2, the second element, which is 103. Then the 103 becomes the accumulator in the next iteration. Then we have the 4 value as the current value right here. Return value is 107, and then 107 becomes the accumulator for the last iteration. Then we have a 10 as the current value, and at the end we get 117 as the output right here. Let's see the instructions. Let's practice calling reduce and using console.log to check the values as reduce iterates through the array. In main.js there is an array of numbers, new numbers array. To start, declare a new variable named new sum using the const keyword. So const new sum. Assign to new sum the value of calling reduce on new numbers. Okay. You don't need to provide any argument to reduce method yet. You will also see a type error undefined is not a function, but we will fix that after we add our callback function in the next step. Okay, and we got the error, type error undefined is not a function. Provide .reduce with an argument of a callback function. The callback function has two parameters. The first parameter is accumulator and the second parameter is current value. Use either a function expression or an arrow function. Let's use arrow function. So the first parameter is accumulator. The second one is current value. And here is the function body. And now, to check the value being used as we iterate through the array, add 3 statements to the function body of the callback. Okay, let's copy these 3 statements and paste them in the function body. And a return statement that adds accumulator to current value. So accumulator plus current value. Run our code. Here we got the result. So the value of accumulator is 1. This is the initial value. By default, we didn't set any initial value as the second parameter of the function. The current value is 3. Accumulator becomes 4 for the next iteration. Current value is 5. And then the accumulator becomes 9 for the last iteration. And then we have 7 as the current value. For the last iteration, log the value of new sum to the console to see the return value of calling reduce on new numbers. Okay, let's see what we will get. So new sum, and we got 16, which is the result of adding all these items. So 7 plus 5 is 12, plus 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. While we have this code set up, let's also check what happens if you add a second argument to reduce method. The second argument acts as an initial value for the accumulator, and we should add argument of 10. Okay, let me see. So right here, add 10. And now we got 10 as the accumulator for the first iteration. So previously we had 16 as the end result, and now because we set 10 as an initial value, we just add 10 to 16 and we get 26 as the end result. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. Iterator documentation. There are many additional built-in array methods, a complete list of which is on the MDNs Array iteration methods page. So right here we have all the iteration methods, so a bunch of them. The documentation for each method contains several sections, a short definition. Okay, let's go there and let's choose one of the methods. Let's choose pop method. Okay, so we have a description, short description. Then we have examples, so the right syntax, a block with the correct syntax for using the method, a list of parameters the method accepts or requires. To some other method, let's pick reduce, the method from the last exercise. And here is the parameters section for the method. Okay, the return value of the function. Okay, here is the return value, the single value that results from the reduction. In that example, an extended description. Here is extended description. Examples of the methods use, so how reduce works, and other additional information below, so polyfill, examples, and that should be all. In the instruction below, there are some errors in the code. Use the documentation for a given method to determine the error or fill in a blank to make the code run correctly. Okay, let's go down there. So in the code editor, there is an array called words. So right here, we want to create a new array of interesting words. The first thing we want to do is check if there are words that are fewer than 6 characters long. There is something missing in the words.sum method call. Fix this method so that true Boolean value is printed to the console. For some information, browse MDNs documentation on sum. Okay, so here is the example of calling the sum method. So straightforward, you call the method on this array and you pass a callback function, and here is the function that we are passing to this sum method, and that function also has a parameter which will result in every single item in this array. So if you look a little bit better right here, we are missing the parameter, so word should be placed right here also, and this is fine. So return true. This statement will evaluate to true if a length of some of these items in the array is less than 6 characters long. So let's run our code now. Okay, we got true. The sum method returned true, which means there are some words in the array that are shorter than 6 characters. Use the filter method to save any words longer than 5 characters to a new variable called interesting words declared with const. So const interesting words is equal to calling the filter method on the words array. So filter method. Okay, we have used filter in a previous exercise, but for more information, browse MDNs Documentation on filter method. Let's see. So the filter method creates a new array with all elements that pass the test implemented by the provided function. Here is the example array, so array of strings. Here is the constant result, and we are storing the new array in that constant, the array which will result from this iteration on the words array, and we are checking if the word.length is greater than 6. So all the items, array items that have strings longer than 6 characters will be stored in this new result array. So let's go back. So we have only one parameter, and now return if word.length is greater than 6, and we should use 5 instead of 6, sorry. Okay, now it's fine. In the last line of main.js, there is this code, console log interesting words. Complete the code between the parentheses to check if every element has more than 5 characters. So interesting words dot every, then a word. Let's go to the new line, so it is much easier to read. Make sure to uncomment, delete the // before the last line of the program before you run the code. For more information, browse MDNs documentation on every method. Let's see. The every method tests whether all elements in the array pass the test implemented by the provided function. It returns a Boolean value. Okay, here is the function we are using. Here is the array. So array 1.every. Then here is the callback function, current value less than 40. Okay, and we need to complete the code. So we check if every element has more than 5 characters. So return, and we should check if every word has more than 5 characters. And let's run our code, and we got true, because this array right here, interesting words, has items with strings longer than 5 characters. So no less than 5 characters in every single item in this interesting words array. And by the way, that's completely true, because we created this interesting words array from this words array, and we imported only items which have strings with length of 6 and more characters. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the next exercise. Choose the right iterator. There are many iteration methods you can choose. In addition to learning the correct syntax for the use of iteration methods, it is also important to learn how to choose the correct method for different scenarios. The exercises below will give you the opportunity to do just that. You will see errors pop up in the terminal as you work through this exercise, but by the end, the errors will be gone. So replace the word method in the first method call with a method that will do something to each of the values in the array and return undefined. So here is the first method call right here, and we should replace this word with the method name, the appropriate method name that we need in this case. So let's try with the forEach method. So method call that will do something to each of the values in the array and return undefined. Okay, run our code. Okay, that's correct. We got the errors here, but that's fine. Here is the first method call we just completed. So we iterated over every single item in this array and we returned undefined. In the second method call, replace the word method with a method that will return a new array with only those elements longer than 7 characters. Okay, let me see where is the second method call. Okay, so right here we need a method that will return a new array with only those elements longer than 7 characters. And let's try with the filter method. So cities right here dot filter. So and we are passing the parameter, so every single element of this array, and we are checking if those elements have strings with 7 or more characters. Okay, that should be fine. Yep, check mark. In the third method call, replace the word method with a method that makes an array that contains multiple values and returns a single value. Okay, here is the method call, and if you can see, we have one parameter, we have the second parameter, and right here we have something like initial value. So for this one, let's try the reduce method. Okay, that's correct. We got the check mark. In the fourth method call, replace the word method with a method that will return a new array of numbers returned from the function. Let me find the method call. So right here. Okay, and for this one, let's try the map method. Yep, that's correct. We got the check mark. In the fifth method call, so in this one, replace the word method with a method that will return a boolean value. Choose a method that will return a boolean value. Let's see. So we are calling the method on the nums array. And for this one, let's try with the sum method. And that's correct. We can use that one. And we completed all the tasks and there is no error right now. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the last exercise. In this one, we will just go over everything we did so far in this second lesson section. Awesome job on clearing the iterators lesson. You have learned a number of useful methods in this lesson, as well as how to use the JavaScript documentation from the Mozilla Developer Network to discover and understand additional methods. And now let's review what we learned so far. So we learned about forEach, which is used to execute the same code on every element in an array but does not change the array and returns undefined. Map executes the same code on every element in an array and returns a new array with the updated elements. Filter checks every element in an array to see if it meets certain criteria and returns a new array with the elements that return true for the criteria. findIndex returns the index of the first element of an array which satisfies a condition in the callback function. It returns -1 if none of the elements in the array satisfies that condition. Reduce iterates through an array and takes the values of the elements and returns a single value. All iterator methods take a callback function that can be predefined or a function expression or an arrow function. You can visit the MDN to learn more about iterator methods and all other parts of JavaScript. If you want to challenge yourself, define a callback function before you use it in an iterator. Chain two iteration methods on the same array. Use the optional argument in an iterator to include the index or the entire array. Check out MDN Array iteration methods page for this one. And use reduce to take a multi-layered array and return a single layer array from scratch. Okay, let's start by creating our array. Okay, now let's create our callbacks. Okay, this is the first one. This callback we will use in filter method. Let's create the second one. Okay, this callback called mapper we will use in the map method. And let's create our last callback function. And this callback called reducer will be used in a reduce method, of course. And if you remember, we have two parameters. So the first one is accumulator and the second one is current value, and we will just return the sum of the accumulator and current value. Okay, let me increase little bit. Okay, and now let's create a new const called new num. So a new array will be stored in this variable. And now let's start with the chaining. So we are calling methods on this num array. So num dot filter, then pass the filtering callback to the filter method, and then chain the map method, and in this one pass the mapper callback, and down here let's console.log this new array, so new num, and let's call the reduce method on that new array, and let's use reducer as callback function for the reduce method, and let's set the initial value. This is also the optional parameter, optional argument. And now let's run our code, and the result is 1500. So we used a callback function before we use it in a iterator, and we used 3 callbacks, chain 2 iteration methods on the same array. Here we chained 2 iteration methods, so the first one is filter and the second one is map. Use the optional argument in an iterator. Here is the optional argument for the reduce method, and use reduce to make a multi-layered array and return a single array from scratch. And we used reduce array. Okay, that should be all for this one. I'm not gonna tell you how we got this last number of 1500. I'll leave you to do that on your own. Go to the MDN website and do some research and see how we get this number. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the project. The project is called Mini Linter. In this project, you will use what you know about iterating over arrays to improve the quality of a paragraph and gather some information about that paragraph. This is the same type of work that word processing software does. Additionally, you may have heard of linting, a process by which text is evaluated and improved by an application. In this project, you will create a miniature version of a linter using array methods that you have learned. If you get stuck during this project or would like to see an experienced developer work through it, click Get Help to see a project walkthrough video. And let's start with the project. So we have 8 tasks. In the code editor, there is a string called story. Here is the string, quite large one. We want to gather some information about the individual words and sentences in the string. Let's split the string into individual words and save them in new array called story words. Okay, let's go there and let's create story words variable. And now let's call the split. Oops. Split method, and let's pass an empty string with the space inside. And now let's update our code. Oops. Now it should be fine. Okay, log how many words there are in this story to the console. Okay, console.log story words dot length. So we are calling the length property on this newly created array called story words. Let's update our code, and we got 188. There is an array of words that are unnecessary. Iterate over your array to filter out these words. Save the remaining words in an array called better words. There are several ways that you could achieve this. First, let's check these two completed. Okay, let's start by creating better words array. And now let's call the method on the story words array. We should call the filter method dot filter. Okay, pass the parameter. And now let's loop through unnecessary words. So let I equals 0, I less than unnecessary words dot length I plus plus. And now let's check if unnecessary words doesn't include the current word. Okay, so oops. So I, and let's use includes string method, and now let's pass the parameter right here, and then just return word. I think this should be fine. Okay, let me console log this newly created array so we can see the results. And here is our new array, and let's see how many items it has. So 185, and originally we had 188, so 3 items less. Exactly how many we have in this unnecessary words array, so this should be fine. Okay, this one is completed. Now there is an array of words called overused words right here. These are words overused in this story. You want to let the user of your program know how many times they have used these overused words. There are 2 ways to achieve this. Try it on your own first. If you need help, consult the hint. Okay, I hope I understand what they want us to do. So let's start by creating a function. I enclosed all the code in the function, so check overused. I created a function expression. Okay, and we'll have 2 parameters. The first one is the first array, and the second one is the second array. Now let's create appears. Oops. Appears variable set to 0. And now let's loop over the first array first. Let's use the forEach this time. So array 1 forEach, use the element parameter. Okay, and now for the second iteration, let's use for loop. So for let j equals 0, j less than array 2 dot length j plus plus. Now let's create our if statement. So we are checking if element is equal to current item of the array 2. Okay, and if so, increment the appears variable. and at the end let's return console.log appears so we can see the results. And now let's call this newly created function. First array should be better words array, and the second one should be overused words. So we are checking for those items in overused words array. And now let's run our code. And we got the number 8, which means that these three strings, really, very, and basically, are used 8 times in this better words array of strings. Okay. Now count how many sentences are in the paragraph. This may seem tricky, but remember that all of the sentences in the paragraph end with a period or an exclamation mark. You could iterate over the array and add 1 to a sentence counter variable for each word that has a period or exclamation mark as its final character. Let's start by creating a function. Once again, I call the function check sentences, and it should accept one array parameter. So one array parameter, don't forget the semicolon. We need to let sentences set to initial value of 0. And now let's do the forEach method on the past array. So forEach, we need one parameter. Now we need the if else statement. Okay, and let's check if word, then word dot length -1 is equal to dot or, so we are using the or operator. This is how we check the last character with -1, and in this one, in this conditional check if it is equal to exclamation point. Okay, and if so, then increment the value of sentences by 1, and let me return the value of sentences and console log, and call the function check sentences with only one array, better words array. And now let's save our code, and we got 12 as a number, so which means that we have 12 strings in this, let me see, in this better words array that have dot or exclamation point as the last character. Okay, let's mark that one completed. Log these items to the console, the word count, the sentence count, this is the word count, this is the sentence count. We already logged those, and the number of times each overused word appears. Okay, let me delete this one first. We don't need that one anymore. Let's console log better words right now. So console.log, and let's say the word count is okay. Sorry, I forgot the length property, not the actual array. So 185. Okay, and now let's fix those first. So we just return the value instead of console logging it. And now let's console.log the check sentences function, and let's pass the better words array, and we got the word count is 12, but I forgot to say the sentences count is 12. At the end we need to log the number of times each overused word appears. Okay, so now let's console log call to this function we created and delete the semicolon, and we got the word count is 185. That's our better words array. Then the sentences count is 12, and we forgot to modify this to word, but overused word. So the overused word count is 8, the sentences count is 12, and the word count is 185. Okay, that's one also completed. Now log the better words array to the console as a single string, and let's use the join method. So better words dot join empty strings with a space, and let's see. And here is our newly generated modified string. Mark that completed. Congratulations, you have improved the original paragraph and given the user some important information about his or her work. Think about ways in which you can extend this project, potentially by using other JavaScript knowledge you have. And here are some ideas. I'll leave you guys to do this on your own. So for the overused words, remove it every other time it appears. Write a function that finds the word that appears the greatest number of times and replace overused words with something else. Okay, that is your homework, and let's mark that completed, and that should be all for the project section. Let's continue to the quiz. So Iterators Quiz. Let's start with the first question. Which of the following iterator methods returns undefined? And if you remember, the forEach method should return undefined. Yep. Which of the following methods returns an array with values that evaluates to truthy based on the condition in the method's block? And let's try with the filter method. Yep, filter returns a new array based on the condition in the callback function. Which of the following methods returns a new array? So for each, filter, sum, or every. Let's choose filter once again. Yep, filter also creates a new array. What is the correct way to refactor for each method's callback function below to use arrow function syntax? Okay, let's see. Name. So this one seems like the right answer. Yep. What is the value of found element after the code runs? So we have one array here, then we do the find index of the first element that is greater than 200. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the right answer. Which of the following methods returns a Boolean value? And let's try with the sum method. Yep. Calling sum on an array returns a Boolean value based on the condition in the callback function. What will the following code return? Let's see, we have a array of strings. Every animal length less than 5. And basically we are checking for these items in an array, and we are checking if the strings or the values of those items are less than 5 characters long. So this one is, for example, 5 characters. So this will evaluate to false, of course. What will the following code return? So instead of every, we have a sum method right here, and this one will evaluate to true because we have some elements that are less than 5 characters long, some strings that are less than 5 characters long. So this one, for example, or this one. So this one is true, of course. Yep, and that should be all. Maximum result. And we completed this section on iterators and JavaScript arrays. Thanks for watching and see you guys in the next one.